why don't you talk about what prompted you to reach out and who you are and your name and all that?
Sure. So my name is Genesis, Jenny for short. I'm a Hispanic woman. I feel like that's important to bring up because like that factors into the things that happened. And I reached out to you because I was watching your YouTube series. I hadn't watched the movie at the time, the film, but I had been watching the series specifically. I had been watching Charlotte videos. And I had started watching them after I had a really, really bad episode. I hadn't self-harmed for like about, I think 2 years, 3 years maybe. And I hit a low point that weekend right before I found the videos. And I was really struggling with going back to therapy. I was struggling with realizing that I hadn't come as far as I thought I had. And so while watching the videos, Charlotte said something of the sort where she really didn't feel like she needed a therapist at that point because she had been doing so well, but then something happened, right? So after watching the videos, I made some phone calls, I got an appointment, and I started doing therapy again. I really wanted to like see if there was anything I could do to help, because it felt like if I hadn't watched those videos, I wouldn't have taken that step, definitely not at that point. I have a friend, without giving too much information, she was just diagnosed with it, and she is like a full-grown woman with, with grown-up children and stuff, so she is fairly along in her life, and she just got diagnosed with it. Up to this point, it had just been depression. And when I tell her about the stuff that I'm going through, or like how I was coping with it at the time, she literally tells me that it helps her because she doesn't feel like she's failing in her path, right? And I feel like that's a big thing with BPD when we have relapses. It's the sense of like, I failed again. I didn't manage the emotion. I let it take over. Here we go again. I've disappointed everyone. Like, at least for me, that's how it felt. And the other person that I know that has BPD felt like that. But when I tell her, hey, like, it happens. It's gonna happen from time to time. We just try to like, get better at managing it.
So you said that, like, first of all, you said you chose to reach out because Charlotte had referenced the fact that she didn't think she needed someone, and then some bad stuff happened, and she rerouted her thinking about that, and that sort of triggered you to reroute your thinking. Is that right? Yeah,
that's right. So the episode that I had wasn't to the degree that Charlotte described her episode, and it was very much of like, I don't want it to get to that degree.
Wait for the beep.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. No, don't apologize. I'm just like, let's see how long the beep goes. Come on, they're backing up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Okay, it's over.
So the reason was that the episode I had that weekend, while for me very intense, very strong. Okay, so the episode I'd had the weekend hadn't been as intense as what Charlotte had described. For me, it was very intense.
Okay, just keep going. We'll see.
Okay. For me, it was definitely intense, but it was not like what she described, where like she's like putting her hands through like glass, her fist through glass. I didn't want it to get to that point, right? Like watching it was kind of like a cautionary tale of like, don't be so confident that you're actually as far ahead as you think you are. Like, even if you think there's nothing to be gained, maybe there is something to be gained. And so, yeah, it was kind of like, I don't want it to get to that point where like I have like gashes down my arm, because the stuff that I have isn't that much compared to like other BPD patients, but to me, like each one feels like a ton,
What you mean each gash feels like a ton?
Each scar, each scar, yeah.
Because why does it feel that way to you?
Because it feels like a weakness, and I know I shouldn't think of it that way, but it does. It feels like I let it get the best of me, like it was, instead of like managing the emotion or just sitting with the sadness or the anger or whatever it is that I was feeling at the time, I let it take over.
Have you self-harmed? Do you mind if I ask since
Yes.
that episode?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, no, since that episode,
Yeah.
I have not. There's been moments where I think about it, and I've had some suicidal ideation, but I've been able to like rein it in for the most part. And my partner has been extremely supportive in that. He does grounding, like he helps me ground. So he'll rub my hands, he'll rub my shoulders until I kind of like come back into myself from the edge, which of course freaks me out, because I worry what'll happen if someday he's not there, right? Which is what if thinking, and I shouldn't think about that, but
It's hard not to.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, what are the feelings that show up for you that make you feel that you can't tolerate what's happening?
The two big triggers, it sucks to realize this, but like I'm aware of it. But the two big triggers are I'm being abandoned, like he's leaving me, like even though he has given me no evidence of that, he's leaving me, and I've disappointed someone. If it's someone close, if it's someone like my mom, if it's someone like my sisters, if it's him, of course, like I'm incredibly hard on myself. And it's not so much anger. I feel like I've never been in a place where the anger has driven me to self-harm. It's always been the sadness of it, like this is, this is too much, I need to think about something else. Having said that though, I do recognize that part of it is manipulative, right? Like look at me, I'm in so much pain, right? Like.
Are you sure it's that way, or do you think that's because of what you read? And now you're like, oh, maybe I mean, I don't know,
I think when it comes to him, I am, because the times that I've self-harmed are because we've been arguing. And I feel like that's my way of being like, oh, like this is doing so much to me, you need to stop. Or like, this is like destroying me, like you need to see things my way. And it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to argue. People argue and it's not the end of the world, right? Like couples all over the world argue all the time over things that are, simple. So yeah, I definitely feel that when it comes to him, it's a way of me, especially because even if he doesn't notice, then afterwards, after the episode has passed, I'll bring it up. You know what I mean? And it won't be like I'll bring it up like, oh, look what you made me do. Like, it'll be like, so my arms hurt, you know what I mean? And like, as I'm doing it, I feel it, like, I'm like, you know what you're doing. You shouldn't be doing this. Like, just don't say anything about it. Why do you need to comment about it? Like, it was a moment, it passed, it's over. So I do feel like there's a manipulation aspect to it, which is why I literally told my therapist, like, I don't want this happening again. Like, he does not deserve that.
And you do that with your mother and sister as well? Even though
No.
I think like that kind of family, like, they're probably not going to abandon you.
Yeah, but with them, it's more the disappointment. That's when I say, like, if I feel like I've disappointed them. Like, I certainly feel like I've disappointed my mom a lot through my life, right? And I feel like...
What qualifies as disappointing her?
So I was a very bright student. I still am, I guess, a very bright student, but I was like a 4.0 student in high school. And everyone had really high hopes for me and my family. And clearly, things didn't pan out, right?
Why do you say clearly?
This is my 10th year of a bachelor's degree because I've had to drop out, enroll again, drop out, enroll again.
What's been the reason behind your dropping out?
Originally, I dropped out because I enrolled at Rutgers University, and then for the first year, I had loans and I had some student aids that helped me cover it. And I was going for astrophysics. It was like my dream to be an astrophysicist. And the second year, I lost some of the aid. The costs were just too high, and I didn't have a co-signer for like the big federal loan that would have covered it.
How come you didn't have a co-signer?
My mom doesn't believe in like federal loans for a bachelor's degree because in PR, college education semester is like $2,000 max. So she didn't want to, and I didn't have anyone else that would, it's a big thing, right? Co-signing a loan of that magnitude. But yeah, so I feel like a good chunk, I blamed it on the system for a while. But like, how with BPD, part of it is also, I feel, maturing, right? And learning to see things from like other angles and not just like your own microcosm. So I feel like I got out of that thinking because I definitely could have done more. Like if I had put in the work to be like a 4.0 student and like once I got to Rutgers, I maybe would have gotten a full ride. Like I don't know that because I didn't put in the work to do that. And yeah, so that's kind of what threw me into the whole, that's really what started it. I'm not sure. I'm assuming I had a disorder prior to that and we just hadn't realized because my mom does say that after she got to like learning about the condition, that there were moments where she was like, oh, like things that I did as a child would make sense to her, right? Like she says that I couldn't do behavior correction. Like she would tell me not to do things and I would still do them right away, which is like one of the things that she read was a trait, right? In BPD, you have a hard time correcting behaviors. So yeah, it definitely feels like it's what like shined a light on it, right? It was having the disappointment of, well, that, and I got insanely bullied in high school. Like, it was really, really bad for me. And when I got to Rutgers, I kind of, for the first time, felt like I made friends, right? Like friends with a lot of people.
Why did you got bullied in high school, by the way?
My weight, the fact that I speak in English a lot, even though PR is like a Spanish-speaking island. The fact that I was like a rocker girl, so like, you know, black nails. I was always reading books. I would rather read a book than like, you know, just do the other things that the girls my age were doing. I wasn't big into makeup. I was kind of a tomboy, but not even really. I think it literally was just, I was too weird compared to the other girls. And the weight was a big thing. Like, it was, the cow jokes were constant, truly constant. I was already anxious too by then, because they would do this thing where like they would come up, like I would come up to someone and they would like scream like they saw a monster. When I'm like, I'm trying to talk to you, but you're trying to make a joke out of it. And the other thing that they would do also with screaming is they would come up behind me to scare me. So I was the girl that if you came up behind her, you could get a guaranteed scream because she's gonna freak the F out, right? And so Rutgers was a completely different experience. I made a ton of friends. Like, we were friends with everybody in the dorm. Like, our room was like the room to hang out in the dorm. I was in charge of the bulletin boards, so I would like decorate the bulletin boards every season. It felt like I was in my place, right? I was vice president of the Astronomical Society. It really felt like I had found that universe I had been looking for, so to speak. And having to leave, having to go back to PR specifically, everybody told me not to leave. I had people offering me to stay with them and just go to the state university, but I was so crushed, I couldn't see anything other than just going back home, right, to mom. I was just blinded by what I wanted and how I wanted to do it. Like, I wouldn't see any other possibilities. So it's not like it had to be Rutgers, but I wanted it to be Rutgers, and I wouldn't allow any other option, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's when I started getting depressed, and I wouldn't come out of it, right? It sunk further and further.
So what happened to you when you had to leave Rutgers, and where was that? You're saying to me that was like sort of the collapse.
Yeah. After I left Rutgers, I enrolled in the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, but I was depressed. I was not in it, right, so to speak. Like, it was crying and crying and crying and crying. Like, it broke my heart, you know, like, even now thinking about it, it kind of like breaks my heart a little bit, because it wasn't just the school, it was the friendships that I had made. And I think that's the part that hurt the most, because after having gone through high school, right, and the things that people said and the things that people did, I made this amazing friend called Ellie. Like, she was my roommate, and it was completely by chance. We got together because of the housing lottery, right? Like, they assigned you randomly, but we were like made for each other. We were both like kind of like cheery, and like we wanted to help, and like we were both Hispanic too, so we could talk to each other about like family things and like relate and stuff. And it wasn't just her, like the whole circle of friends that I had, it felt like it was such an accepting place, and I hadn't felt that in PR ever. I don't think I ever felt as like accepted as I did at Rutgers, just overall. I definitely feel like I missed out on some great relationships, for sure. So yeah, leaving it sucked. It sucked. And I do still blame the system, but I blame it in terms of like the financial system. Like, I don't understand how it's okay for a student that had done everything right? Because I didn't fail out either. Like, my grades dropped, but I wasn't failing out of school or anything of the sort. how it's okay for like someone like me to lose out on those opportunities. Like, how are we at a point where there's schools in Europe that are offering free education, and I'm going to a state school. It's a state school, so it's not like a privately funded university. And I have to drop out when it's like literally everything that I wish for is to be there and to participate and to engage in the community and do things in the community. Like, how is that okay? Like, I feel like that's the biggest thing for me left over, is like, how is that okay, right? So I guess we could say there's some anger there about that. It didn't make sense. It really didn't. And I feel like after that didn't make sense for me, a lot of things also didn't make sense. It just kind of like started the whole thing. And I'm sure, like I said, like I'm sure if BPD, like if there was some underlying thing my whole life, and we just hadn't picked up on it because like it just hadn't manifested itself or whatever, I feel like having left was the thing that like triggered it, right? And even if at some point I had noticed it, maybe, I don't know, like maybe it wouldn't have been as bad as it got, right? Maybe I wouldn't have had the suicide attempts. Maybe like my parents wouldn't have had to like deal with all of that. And maybe it would have happened like in a more safe space, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. It sounds like you found your place and it was then taken away.
Like that's exactly the word that I used to like explain it to, because shortly after, you know, my mom recognized, like I would tell her like I don't know like how to get out of bed. I don't know how to do things. I don't know like how to stop crying, right? And so she recognized that maybe I needed to see a professional. My Hispanic families, or at least my experience with the Hispanic families that I know, is that, you know, we pray it away, right? Just lean on God. And not to discount the power of religion, because I do think that when you have strong faith, it definitely helps you to find something that gives you comfort. But I was not in that space, right? My faith had been shaken long before that. And even now I feel like I have a pretty shaky relationship with it. So it was not something that I could lean onto or like get comfort from. We just had the experience of my aunt having gone through a very severe depression and not wanting to seek help. She did eventually seek help, but it took a lot for her to get to that point. It took a lot of us like prodding her. And so having dealt with that sort of recently, my mom kind of went like, okay, let's look into like getting a professional, right? So then started my journey with professionals. And the first doctor I saw was like a psychiatrist, psychologist combo, sort of. The psychologist would see you for 20 minutes, and then at the last 10 minutes, the psychiatrist would come in. The psychologist would like kind of like tell him everything that I've been going through, and he would like prescribe, adjust, etc., right? So they originally diagnosed me with depression, and then they, after some time, I think maybe a month, 2 months, they changed the diagnosis to bipolar disorder. And it certainly felt like some things fit. Like some things definitely felt like, oh, like this makes sense. This doesn't make sense, but this thing does make sense. So we found a support group in the Capitol. My mom and I would drive up there to meet with them. And that's when I started noticing like these people. One of them drenched himself in gasoline during a manic episode. Like I've never experienced a loss of control to that degree. I've never gotten so drunk that I've passed out. Like it's just, I've always been in control of myself, right? Maybe not when I'm cutting, but like in terms of manic, right? I've always been in control. And so I don't even remember all the medication that he started me on, but he had me on clonazepam. He had me on Seroquel at one point. They had me on Lamictal. They had me on Adderall at first, then they switched me to Vyvanse. They had me on Wellbutrin. So they would just keep changing the doses, trying something, increasing it, decreasing it. And I feel like at one point I was numb, right? And then at one point when I did do a shift of psychiatrist, he put me on Latuda only. To its credit, I feel like it did do something good for me. Okay. But by that point, I was determined that I was going to be weaned off. Like I was determined that I was done with it.
Like, let's wean?
I had started CBT therapy by that point. I had already switched psychologists, and I was working with a lady that I feel like I owe her my life, really.
Wow.
And she really helped me a lot, and she was doing DBT. Basically, she was the one who told me, like, you're not bipolar, you are borderline. And that's when things clicked and things actually made sense, like on a whole nother level.
And what clicked for you?
I remember exactly like the discussion. She had a whiteboard and she drew a circle and she was like, okay, so this is your cycle. An event happens that triggers an emotion, that triggers a reaction, that then triggers your action to that. And then you deal with the consequences and the guilt of having done that. And that was the thing where I went like, right? So she started going like, okay, so we're gonna start working on detecting what is the event. Don't worry about restraining it right now. We'll work on what is the event. And that certainly helped me become aware, right? And once I became aware of it, it slowed it down to the point where like I was able to move out of my parents' house. I was able to like move to Florida, get a job, basically become completely financially independent because I was paying for my rent, I was paying for my power, my groceries. I wasn't on food stamps, so I was really paying for everything. So then, which is why I thought that I had gotten so much better, right? I'd done all of this. I hadn't been able to go back to school, but I'd gotten my life sort of like in working order. And so that was, sorry, to your question about what was the thing, it was the cycle when she explained it to me and like just helping me realize the cycle, and then afterwards realizing why I was reacting a certain way to like certain triggers, right?
With most of the triggers, what I was taught was that most of the triggers are often interpersonal.
Oh yes, 100%. The abandonment, I have abandonment issues, was front and foremost. Like that was the biggest trigger, right? Something happened with my dad, who was like who is the reason I have abandonment issues. And that's when, I would spiral. I would go visit him, like I would talk to him. Like I tried really hard to be part of his life, and I love my stepbrothers too. So like I would go spend time with my stepbrothers and stuff. And he still does this thing. As soon as I call him, right? And I go visit him, the first thing he says like, oh, you're getting real chunky, you're getting real chunky. And yes, I know, you don't need to bring it up, but that's something he still does. He doesn't realize that it doesn't come off how he intends it. I think he intends it, I honestly think part of him sees it as like a well-meaning thing where he's like looking out for me, right? But he doesn't realize how it hurts. He really doesn't. And
are your stepbrothers overweight at all? Are your half brothers?
Not at all.
Okay, I wanted to test his gender relation.
Yeah, no, they are slim. And my stepmom is super slim, but he is extremely obese. And I have never ever talked to him like ever, like in that regard. I have never even brought it up, right? The double standard there, where like you're telling me about my chunkiness, but when I was staying over 12 years old, we were driving at midnight to get subs down the street, but yeah.
Like when did you have suicide attempts?
That was after New Jersey, before Florida. So that was.
Oh, I see. Okay,
yeah.
That was during that time. Okay, so you get to Florida, and you're how old when you're in Florida now?
I am 3 years younger than now, so 25. Yeah, 25 in Florida.
So you basically from say 20 to 25-ish, 19 to 25-ish, you were in PR figuring it out.
Yeah, figuring it out. And let's say from 19 to 23, maybe 24, really, I was not coping well at all.
Got it. Okay, and for you, not coping equals doing what?
Equals the self-harming, overdosing on the medications.
So you were overdosing on medication, the medications they given you?
To kill myself, mind you. Yeah.
And are you still on the medication?
No, I had been telling you about the psychiatrist that diagnosed me with bipolar. We realized things weren't working out after that second attempt, right? Because like I had been in treatment for 2 years already with this person, and things were just not, like they weren't working out, right? I was not improving. If anything, it felt like I was getting worse, right? And it also felt like I had begun to notice that the psychologist would be my friend rather than be a treater, right? She would validate me a lot, but didn't need to be validated. I needed to be shown or explained to like why things were working that way in my head, right? Like I'm a logical person. I like to think I'm a logical person. So when I know the reason to something, it helps me cope, right? So we started looking for a second opinion, right? And on the first appointment, I kid you not, this lady was like, you don't sound like you're a bipolar patient, but I'm not gonna make a call on that, and we're gonna wait and see how it progresses. I think about a month and a half after we started, that's when she kind of went like, so out of the 9 traits for borderline, you have like all but 2. And I think we should start treating you with DBT, which is what has been like proven to work a lot with it. And so she started doing DBT treatment, and it wasn't easy at times for sure. Like there were times when like I wanted, after that session was done, I wanted to punch things. I wanted to be like, I'm never coming back, because she would confront me on things that I wasn't, you know, that I wasn't doing right or that I wasn't thinking right. But I needed that, right? Like now I recognize I needed that. And I was still on meds, but I was also starting to improve a lot with the DBT, and I felt like I was managing things. And at one point I told them, I don't want to be on medications anymore. Like I don't. I had been looking at research that, you know, that said the medications were more for like managing the symptoms of it, whereas like the therapy itself was what treated the condition, right? What helped you improve. And I felt like I was already improving and the symptoms weren't as bad. So they weaned me off.
And now where are you with school?
So I am on the last year of my bachelor's degree.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then what happens? What do you want to do from there?
I want to apply for a master's degree at Rochester Institute of Technology for astronomy.
Do you want to be an astronaut?
Not astronaut. It intimidates me.
Yeah.
Something about space, like I am in awe and terrified of it all at the same time.